emergency calls, and there was a public comment that.
So, the 911 will advise us if we're needed for something like that, but we are not attached to hazmat suits for
Would you be able to announce that, because
yes, so 911 usually advises us if certain calls, if we're requested there. For situations as far as chemical, use, we're not unfortunately attached with hazmat suits. The fire has more, better equipment than we unfortunately have at the time. So 911 usually advises us if we need it or not.
Well, I called 911 and then I waited about 10 minutes and nobody was responding, and I called again and she said the police and the fire are on their way. She didn't say that the police weren't contacted. She said the police and fire were on their way.
And what incident was this? I can definitely.
Macintosh Compressor Station, there was a release of something on Saturday.
Okay.
We don't know what it is.
Okay. Yeah,
We're waiting for the DEP and the PA Department of Health. But I mean, to me, I would think, look, we're talking about well pads going in here and emergencies. What if there is a release and somebody smells something and they call? I waited, I don't know how long. It took a long time for the fire truck to get there. I mean, something bad could happen to somebody. Your first response, I expected the police to come. I wanted you to take a report. This is a nuisance. I mean, there should be something, not just me calling 911. There's probably nothing out there. I mean, I look at you, the police as a first responder. They need to come, and so does the fire. If something happens on one of these well pads that we're giving a conditional use, what's our plan? What is our plan?
Yeah.
Are you going to respond or not?
Well, that's something definitely I'd like to talk to the chief about.
Well, yeah.
To the board, it was on
It's
the date of the
important.
5th.
Yeah.
Okay.
It should have
Because
been done.
that's a matter of life and death.
Should have been done.
Thank you so much. Officer will report back to us at the next meeting, and we can get a message to Ms. Duncan. Okay, item C, unfinished business, vacancies. We've had 4 vacancies, although one, the CERMS representative, we are, that's kind of on hold until we figure some things out with our ambulance service. But we've had 3 positions open since the beginning of the year. We can't do anything more than continue to advertise those on Facebook and hope that someone is interested in stepping into any of those positions. We'll keep them on the agenda and on our Facebook page. Before I move over to action items, I did want to touch base on the questions regarding right to knows. And as a qualifier, the board is not privy to right to knows. We have 2 right to knows officers, and they handle all right to knows. So is there any outstanding right to knows?
Currently, there's one that I actually answered today, but there are currently no outstanding right to know requests at this time.
Okay. So based on the public comment, is our office or someone getting back to the residents?
Yes, absolutely. There have been very little right to know requests this year, but they've been answered in a timely manner.
What about the statement Ms. Boardman?
I provided what we have. Like the client trust sheets, I've provided what we were given from everything.
So we are not giving items?
No, not that I'm aware of, but I mean, unless Bobby has different insight, but not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's not
So
true. I have not been contacted.
Okay, at this point,
I
please.
was awarded
We'll look into it, Ms. Warren, okay? We'll look into it.
Would Sarah and Bobby, would you be able to update the staff with an email?
Absolutely. I will definitely look into it. I will update the staff and forward with an email tomorrow.
And it's worth telling the public, a lot of the information that it sounded like was requested is all tied up in the current litigation that the township is undergoing. And we are precluded by law to speak on anything litigation-wise. And, or we, as a board, will be in trouble. And it would cause more litigation and more fees to the township taxpayers. So we have to rely on our right to know officers. One is an attorney, and Attorney Sweat sitting right here to advise us on even how to respond to some of the public comments. Anything else from the board or supervisors? Okay, so moving on to action items. Number 1, approve deny minutes from January 26th. 2022 public meeting. Before I read off 1, 2, and 3, to the board, to the staff, there were apparently significant changes made to these meeting minutes by one of our supervisors, and to my knowledge, they have not been updated yet. Can you give the board some insight on this?
Okay, they're transcribed, and after the changes were made, I have to go back and listen to the tape. If it's a 4-hour meeting, it will take approximately 6 hours to listen to the tape and compare to make sure everything's changes and what exactly is on the tape is done verbatim.
Okay, so and Terry, you do some of the transcribing. Is this a transcribed, like a dictation? Is that what this is, or are these something that can be done?
No, generally our meeting minutes, we attempt to provide as much detail to add context to the citizens and the board members that go back, but according to PSATs, for example, when a citizen makes a public comment, all we're required to do is include the topic that they made a comment on. So, you know, that's all that's required to be in our minute books, but to go back and listen to this, I mean, like, honestly, this last meeting's minutes, I personally just did not have time to go to do the full minutes for the last 3.5-hour meeting. It's a time intensive thing, even with as brief as we try to make them. So it's just going to take time to go back and put as much detail in it.
Okay, so this is a question of whether we are transcribing them verbatim or
We
summarizing.
do not transcribe.
Right, I
Minutes or
understand.
not, yeah.
So I would like to open that up first to Attorney Sweat to make a recommendation, and then the board to discuss what they would like to do.
I believe the issue is whether or not all public comment should be identified verbatim in the minutes. That's not required by law, and it's not recommended. The purpose of the minutes is to identify in writing the legislative action that this board takes. And the Pennsylvania Sunshine Law specifically instructs the secretary on the contents of those minutes. The public comment, you should put in the minutes the name of the citizens who appeared and the subject matter of their testimony, not a verbatim transcript of what they said. What needs to be verbatim is the motion that's adopted by this board, because that becomes your legislative record. And I think the more important thing is to document in minutes that action as soon as possible, get it approved and get it in our minute book. And if transcribing verbatim all public comment that could go on and on is delaying the adoption of these minutes, I think that's not a good thing.
Okay. Thank you for your legal advice. Opening up to the board for discussion on this.
And here's one other thing. It would take a majority vote of the board to instruct the secretary and staff to do a verbatim transcript of all public comment. Not just one supervisor can't direct that. It's gonna, if you're gonna change that, it would take a vote.
Okay, so any comments from other supervisors?
My comment would be keep it the way we've done it, outlining just the stuff that Gary talked about.
I had made a suggestion to Roberta that there was a lot of the meeting minutes that were the discussions that we had. And that I think one of the meeting minutes were 24 pages long. So I had actually made a suggestion to maybe check with everybody else whether or not all of that discussion needs to be in there. That it is really just the action items and so forth. But if you were going to include discussion items between board members, all of the board members, parts of the discussion would have to be in there. And that seemed to be where some of the stall point was on the meeting minutes. They were, I think one might have even been 29 pages long.
So, alrighty, so we're going to have to table these first three because they're not revised as such.
Well, can I ask if we're okay with not including as much discussion, but still doing the minimum as required by law for these meetings to save us time, would the board consider looking at just less of the discussion so that we can get them turned over faster?
I think, my opinion is I think we need to put this as a vote for the next meeting. Approve, deny, changing the whole structure of how we do minutes and let the board vote.
The discussion almost becomes immaterial once the motion is voted on. So you have an approve, deny. If there's an approval of something, you don't need to belabor the discussion that led up to that approval. And definitely, I would shorten any reference in the minutes to public comment. Identify the person, their address, and basically a quick summary of what they talked about, objected to, or asked the board to look into.
A lot of the bulk of the minutes weren't even action items, they were discussions at the end. So a lot of what the meeting minutes were way past action items. There were pages of,
Discussion items don't need to be in the minutes.
that's what I was suggesting to Roberta, that you
Yeah.
don't have to have the discussion at all.
D 1 through 22 is what you pay attention to in your minutes.
Okay, what about the deliberation then, before a final vote is taken?
Yeah.
I mean, does that have to be all in there, detailed out?
No. Not if you're voting on a motion to approve. Deliberation, at that point, doesn't matter, because the motion has been adopted.
Okay.
I mean, if you want me to take a look at some of these minutes and make some recommendations, if that would help your task, make it simpler, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, we're taking 6 hours to do minutes. I mean, that's 6 hours, we're not getting something done.
I think our minutes are good. For the most part, they're very good, and unless we,
Can we please keep it down, it's hard to hear, thank you.
unless it's a specific item that a specific supervisor wants that was said or statements made that they would like in there, that's completely agreeable. But for the most part, I think our minutes are completely accurate. There's a tiny bit of discussion to give the reader of the minutes an idea of what was being discussed prior to a vote. I don't think they're over lengthy. Our meetings are sometimes 4 hours, 5 hours long, so it stands to reason the minutes are comparable. I think it's a waste of time and money to hand them to Sweat Law Office to review for recommendations. We've all been handling minutes very well. I would suggest if someone wants to redact or add minutes, their changes need to be sent to the whole board for an approved deny. And we can maybe hash it out at the board table when we go to approve them. So, the minutes, the recommended changes, can we get those in front of the board for next meeting so we can,
Okay.
the board can decide at the next meeting and look through them and work through it together? Does that sound reasonable to the board? Okay, make a motion. I would like to,